We're going to move now down to the local level to talk about integrated local financing frameworks and how the approach can respond at the regional, at the subnational, at the local level. So I'm going to call on my colleague Jordi Lopart, who's a special advisor to the UNDP Administrator on Partnerships, to lead this panel.
Good afternoon, everybody. So if you can, colleagues, come in, take your seats. This is going to be hopefully an engaging, well, for sure, an engaging panel. Welcome. Let me just put my eyes on, otherwise I won't be able to deliver. Good afternoon and welcome to session 11. Of the 2025 INFF Facility Partners Meeting. This session is dedicated to the integrated local financing frameworks and brings at the forefront a critical dimension of sustainable development, the role of local and regional governments in achieving the global goals of Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement. As we know, more than 100 SDGs, 62%, require full engagement at the local level, regional and local governments. These governments are not only the key investors in achieving those goals, but also at the forefront of service delivery, and they're also the primary respondents to multifaceted crises such as climate change and biodiversity loss. Their proximity to communities allows, with precision and accountability, to deliver on the priorities defined at the national level. Yet, the potential of local governments remains constrained by systemic challenges, including limited space in needs assessment, lack of capacity in some aspects, and reliance on often unpredictable financing flows. The lack of financial space or financial autonomy is at the heart of their inability sometimes to deliver for the people they serve on the ground. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda highlighted the need for a robust local financing system, including commitments to support local revenue and debt management, participatory approaches to financing, and investments in capacity building. Since then, local governments in over 10 countries have begun using the integrated local financing frameworks approach to address these issues, showcasing innovative models of financing, mobilization, and alignment. However, much work remains to be done, and we stand at a pivotal moment to strengthen these efforts. This session is particularly relevant as we look ahead at the FFD4 in Seville. The zero draft of the FFD outcome document that was released only last Friday explicitly underscores the importance of subnational finance in strengthening fiscal systems aligned with sustainable development. It encourages enhanced technical capacity, diversified financing resources, and the development of local municipal markets while promoting fiscal transfers that respond to local needs. Today, we have an opportunity to explore how the integrated local financing frameworks can be a cornerstone of all these ambitions. So allow me to introduce a wonderful panel of experts that we have here today with us, with a diverse pool of expertise from different corners of the world. So allow me to call on Ms. Ana Fernando Hierro Barba, the Technical Secretary of the Council of Strategic Planning of Nuevo León, Mexico. Buenas tardes. You can start coming to the panel. Sivafon Churamani, the Division Chief, the Department of Planning, Ministry of Planning and Investment of Lao, PDR. I'm also calling to the podium Sebastián Bauzel, Head of Secretariat Local 2030 Coalition, Pablo Fernández Marmosel Daguerre, Assistant Secretary General for Partnerships at UCLG. Aitor Pérez, founder of Economistas de la Cooperación. And Xavier Mestres Riera from the World Forum on Local Economic Development. Welcome, all of you, and thank you for participating in this panel. So we are going to have, with a large panel, as you all see, we're going to have an interesting discussion, and I'm going to ask my fellow panelists to please keep it as pedagogical and short as possible, and trying to make sure that we can have time to engage on a discussion with the colleagues listening to this and engaging from the floor. So without further ado, if I may start with you, Ana Fernanda, let me phrase this question to you. Nuevo León has been leveraging the INFF approach through subnational development finance assessment to identify financing gaps. Tell us a little bit about your experience in that kind of exercise, and what key challenges has Nuevo León encountered in financing the SDGs, and what actions do you think would be effective in addressing them? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to stick to my 6 minutes. First, I'm very happy to be here, and let me begin by saying that Consejo Nuevo León, the organization where I work, is a multi-sectorial body. It's a non-partisan permanent advisory body to the state's government. So while we are not part of the government, we are mandated by law to do long-term planning for the state, as well as to bring together people from academia, the OSCs, NGOs, as well as from local government and private sector together to think about the future of our state. We have been going on for 10 years, and during that time we've been in charge of doing the long-term strategic plan for the state, which now runs till 2040. And that includes SDGs, and it was a pioneer plan in the country into incorporating that. As well, we do a follow-up of all the indicators or key indicators towards the long term for our state. And so that's why the UNDP approached us to do the assessment. So we did the assessment in coordination with the state government, and it showed that Nuevo León has a huge gap in order to meet the SDG goals for 2030. We were the first of national government in Mexico to actually do this, and we found out we need double our state budget in order to be able to meet our goals. And let me put this in context. We are probably Mexico's richest state in terms of GDP per capita. We have the highest GDP per capita in the country. We have the lowest unemployment rate, 3.5%. We have very internationally renowned universities. We are, the innovative, financial, and very prosperous state of Mexico, and at the same time, we are still only meeting half of the budget needs we need in order to accomplish our SDGs. So the thing is, that provides us with two main challenges that I see as for the state of Nuevo León in order to move forward. And the first is that while we have been trying to work on these issues of thinking long-term and putting SDGs front and center in our planning strategies, talking about it with the financial secretary of the state and bringing it to a national conversation, there is really no coordinated strategy between the national and subnational governments in order to move forward together with a more cohesive strategy. And second, the truth is that the SDGs, while useful and while very now, common in the language of both the bureaucracy as well as the academia and the private sector, they are not the main focus for prioritizing spending, investment, or restructuring of the administration of the state. And those two challenges actually complement each other and give us the state where we are. So the truth is that there is no real conversation on a collaborative strategy to make this happen, at least not in 5 years. And Nuevo León's successful story in our country has made it fall from the list of the federal government priority. We do well in our country, right? We, as I said, we have a good GDP per capita, we have good unemployment. We are the largest receiver of international foreign direct investment in the country. We're next to the border with Texas. So in theory, we're doing good. but still, there's a gap. There's a big gap. So what happens is that whenever the country has to engage into bring in international actors to finance something, it usually goes to other states. It goes to the poorer states, and with reason, right? I mean, while Nuevo León has only 20% of its population in poverty, there are states in Mexico that have over 60% of their population in situations of poverty. So we're not the national priority. So what do we do? What do we do if we still want to move forward? And that's why I think it's very interesting to think about local government or local governments and local entities being part of a broader conversation in the international scheme. Because let me tell you a few things. Yes, we've improved in certain priorities in terms of, for example, public investment in 2024 was five times larger than it was in 2021. We increased our public investment fivefold, which is huge, yet our inequality keeps growing, as well as our population. In the past decade alone, Nuevo León has increased its population in 25%, mainly due to international and internal migration. It has not to do with the births we have locally, but we are a successful state, so we attract migrants from inside Mexico. But with policies such as the ones that were announced these past days in the United States, well, international migrants stay in Nuevo León, and that has stressed our education system, our health system, our capacity to actually respond to our population. For example, we are a 5 million people metropolis with poor housing and public transportation policies. The time it takes someone to move around in our metropolis is about 2 hours average in public transportation. And we have air pollution problems as well as water shortages. So even though we have these challenges, they're not anything compared to the challenges we have in the south of the country. So we don't have this sense of crisis that something, intense or worrisome is happening in Nuevo León. And this, in turn, limits our capacity to lean on international support for tackling these challenges. So I'm gonna finish here because I don't want to take over the entire time. But what I was gonna say is, the last thing I want to say is that while Mexico is the country with the most of national voluntary local reviews submitted to the UN, this doesn't necessarily translate into organized strategies for funding the SDG gaps or into a collaborative approach towards addressing them. So what kind of financial instruments do we actually have in order to advance? And I would say that in order to address this, it would be great to have the formal inclusion of subnational governments in the discussions of a formal coordination mechanism. We have the potential of being able to pilot solutions on a local level, and that can then amplify to national strategies, as well as we can help promote local coalitions or local national coalitions, and that would be fantastic in order to address certain specific challenges. Moreover, we subnational government, I'm not in government, but we subnational entities have specific knowledge of its population needs, and we can provide an approach towards a more detailed or tailor-made solutions that can, in the aggregate, help towards the SDG goals. So finally, I just want to say that we have advanced on certain normative instruments, but we need to work on efficiency and on pertinence in terms of how we can not only know the size of the problem, but actually make it part of our definition of our instruments, policy instruments, in a more consistent way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. We will discuss definitely the issue of the local coalitions and the importance of tailor-made solutions, but definitely the point of inclusion of subnational and local governments in the conceptualization of those mechanisms that are helping define national financing strategies is a key element of the thing we're going to hear throughout this table. Allow me now to invite Sifafon Chumanri for her intervention. The government of Lao PDR has developed a financing strategy as part of its INFF process to support the 95-year National Socio-Economic Development Plan 2021-2025, From national perspective, what challenges have you faced in implementing the INFF, both at the central and at the local level? And any thoughts that you can share on how it can be better, or it can be, and any lessons learned on how those challenges that you have faced could be overcome in future iterations of this plan? Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me begin by describing the IMF journey in our country. So we initiated the process when COVID broke out, which was in year 2020, with the support of UNRCO and UNDP in Laos. And the primary objective was to develop a financing strategy to support the implementation of the current 5-year National Socio-Economic Development Plan between 2021 and 2025, which at that time also underwent its formulation process. So between year 20 and year 2022, more than 20 days of high-level and technical workshops and consultations took place, in addition to the countless informal meetings that we had with our government counterparts and also UN colleagues. And the financing strategy eventually was endorsed by our Prime Minister in June 2023. And just a few weeks later, we had a high-level launch of the financing strategy. And so the time that it took to complete this exercise, as you could see, that it's more than 2 years. And that has now led me to elaborate on the challenges that we faced. I have broken down the challenges into 5 categories, including COVID-19, limited capacity, the challenging implementation, development cooperation, and the INFF knowledge management. I will begin with COVID-19. It significantly disrupted the financing strategy development, which also forced us to simultaneously to review the 9th and SEDP priorities. For example, the readjustment of the GDP growth rate, which initially was set at 7%, and then we had to take into considerations of the economic and financial impacts, and the growth rate significantly reduced. And alongside the 9th and SEDP and the FS, we juggled multiple high-level policy documents, which added complexity to our already heavy shoulders and demanding workload. So, you know, how it felt like during the outbreak, everything just felt like an F1 race. Everything was constantly competing for your attention. So it was from saving lives to minimizing losses across all levels, and the urgency was really overwhelming. So the government swiftly implemented a nationwide lockdown, which restricted the mobility and the travels. Although these measures were effective, but then they posed a lot of significant challenges for a poor country like mine, where limited internet access and virtual office capabilities really hindered the quick adaptation to the new normal, if you guys do remember. So in other words, this made it very, very difficult to reach some of the government offices, particularly at local levels, which further prohibited their engagement. Now, moving on to challenge number 2 is the limited capacity, but within our context, I would like to highlight the English language barrier, which presented quite a particularly unique constraint for our country. English proficiency across government ministries is quite low, particularly at local levels. And during the development of the FS, we mainly worked in English because of the involvement of international consultancy. And again, you know, that further highlighted government, local government participation. And again, like many countries, the INFF was quite new, and it had to compete with other several urgent priorities. And given these circumstances, piloting the INF process at the central level proved to be more efficient in terms of timing and also the available technical capacity. But despite this centralized approach, it still took 3 years to get to this stage. Implementation is the challenge, number 3, that we faced. Although, we have successfully produced the strategy, but again, this is only the beginning of the journey, and therefore, translating national policies to sectoral or local levels can still be tough because the FS is still a very national level document that requires extensive dissemination and also integration into the work plans and budgets of ministries and local governments to ensure successful implementation. But this is not the case at the moment. Moving on to the next challenge, which is development cooperation, which is twofold, is the increasing unpredictability of ODA and the need to realign development programs with our priorities. Sometimes I feel like there's a misalignment between development partners' priorities and our national plan. Moreover, there's also a shortage of large-scale programs capable of driving systematic change. Furthermore, collaboration with diverse development partners is often complex due to varying institutional procedures and also the compliance requirements. So this complexity really strains our already limited ODA absorption capacity. Last challenge, maintaining the INFF momentum has been challenging due to resource constraints and also staff turnover, which is probably another unique challenge for our country. So as key personnel transition to new roles, sensitizing incoming colleagues becomes really critical, and to preserve the approach core benefits. And without proper knowledge transfer and management, I think that we will lose the INF's key advantages, such as policy coherence and cross-sectoral coordination. And last year, I highlighted to our UN colleagues back in Laos that there was a lack of conferences and workshops, which I felt that it really caused the INFF spirit to really diminish. Now, how do we move forward? One, we know that there will be uncertainties, that's for sure, and they will continue to grow. Shocks will continue to persist. With climate change impacts and other transformation, for example, rapid technological changes like AI, like our colleague from the Philippines mentioned this morning, we must harmonize our planning and financing system. This means we have to formally integrate the INFF steps into our planning cycle. We pilot tested the INFF in this 5-year planning cycle, and we managed to get it done, but it's only during the last year of the current 5-year plan. But for the 10th and SEDP, which spans from 2026 to 2030, we want to make sure that the FS could roll out timely and that local actors are engaged from the beginning. And lastly, our planning and financing systems have been put into test for the past 3 and 4 years, like never before. And we would like to call upon the INFF facility and its process to guide us in building this national capacity on financing and planning. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So no, the issue of the lack of capacity, but also the lack of involvement from the beginning, no, from the conceptualization of the financial strategy at the local level, but also at the national level. I think the ownership needs to start from the very beginning. Otherwise, it's very difficult to trickle down. So I do thank both examples of challenges that we have encountered, both in needs assessment or implementation of the territorialization of the INFF tool at the local level. So I appreciate that. We would move now into looking into how the global networks of local entities can support this process of bringing the integrated national financing frameworks at the level of the local. So with that, we have Pablo Fernández Marmosel de Quer, from UCLG. And my question to you, Pablo, would be that we have seen now, heard these perspectives from the national level. You represent the largest network of local entities, cities and local governments globally. What can a network of networks, I would say, like UCLG, could do or can offer to better support that subnational actors in overcoming the challenges? These are two examples of challenges, but there are a diversity of challenges that national governments and subnational governments are facing in scaling this local level implementation of the INFFs. I mean, what would be your take? And if you can elaborate a little bit maybe on the work of UCLG is doing at the global sphere to also position, right, the importance of the localization agenda in the minds and hearts of member states of the UN, national governments worldwide, and other actors. The floor is yours, Pablo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordi, and good to see you, everyone. Good to see members of UCLG here. I will be speaking in Spanish so that you have your translation for the linguistical diversity. Gracias, Jordi, y empezaría diciendo que desde ciudades y gobiernos locales unidos, el trabajo es traer la voz unificada de los gobiernos locales a la discusión intergubernamental. Y en este sentido puede sonar limitado digamos, la función en tanto a los retos que implica la financiación, pero llevar la voz unificada ya es suficiente trabajo dentro de los 250,000 gobiernos locales y regionales que representamos. Esto lo hacemos a través de la vía de la Global Task Force de gobiernos locales y regionales que agrupa a las 30 redes internacionales de nuestro colectivo, y además somos la organización que representa el grupo de interés de las autoridades locales ante el ECOSOC y en este caso en específico para la Conferencia de Financiación para el Desarrollo, la entrada, digamos, formal es el ECOSOC. En ese sentido, voy a hablar un poco de lo que es esta voz unificada y en dónde hay coincidencias de lo que se tiene que comprometer el colectivo de gobiernos locales, pero también en dónde hay coincidencias de lo que se está pidiendo. Empezaría por decir que, a diferencia de Addis Abeba, donde estamos hoy y coincide con la lógica de las 6 transiciones que presenta la DSG para la localización efectiva 2030, coincide con el enfoque que tenemos como colectivo, que es, se necesita generar entornos financieros que sean amigables con el gobierno local, y para esto hay que cerrar 2 brechas fundamentales. Una es de regulación y la otra es de políticas públicas. Y en ese sentido estamos convencidos que el financiamiento hacia la infraestructura municipal y regional tiene que estar listo para entrar en el mercado. Y para estar listo a entrar en el mercado necesitamos regulaciones, otro tipo de políticas públicas, y que la inversión es tanto de gobiernos nacionales, pero también con otros fondos públicos y de gobiernos y de entidades privadas. Y para eso entramos en una lógica de los marcos de financiación integrados a nivel nacional que ustedes presentan. No serán nunca integrados si no consideran lo local y lo regional. Es decir, ya es paradójico hablar de una integración cuando no consideras a una esfera de gobierno y a los otros actores. Y esto en consecuencia es lo mismo hacia la negociación multilateral. No será integrada y no estaremos hablando del 100% del financiamiento si no consideramos desde su negociación a los otros actores que serán no solo implementadores, sino responsables políticos de la implementación de la agenda. Porque la responsabilidad política se tiene que poner sobre la mesa. No solo la responsabilidad política de integrarlos en la negociación, sino a quién se le van a exigir esas cuentas. En esa lógica, el mensaje consolidado viene también de la evidencia. El 65% de los ODS son responsabilidad. No quiere decir qué es lo que se está haciendo, es lo que tiene que hacer el gobierno local y regional de la Agenda 2030. Y en esto un dato importante, casi el 40% de la inversión pública de la Agenda 2030 viene de gobiernos locales y regionales. Y son estas dos paradojas gigantescas de la negociación, contempla, dentro de la multiplicidad de actores que pueden ser los Estados miembros, una única representación en la negociación para este 40%, hablando en términos de dinero, del responsable de la implementación. En esto, y es una coincidencia que no vemos en el borrador cero que se presenta, es la importancia de la descentralización fiscal como una prioridad urgente, tanto para el sistema internacional como para los marcos de financiación integrada. Las transferencias intergubernamentales tienen que ser predecibles, transparentes y tienen que estar basadas en las necesidades locales. Y para eso, los ministerios de Hacienda cuentan con un aliado que tiene el pulso de la necesidad local, que es el gobierno regional. Y finalmente, la necesidad del gobierno y de esta esfera con responsabilidad política de tener una autonomía tanto para recaudar ingresos propios como para gestionar sus propios recursos de manera eficiente. Y en ese sentido, volvemos a la idea de estar listas para el mercado. No estamos únicamente hablando de dinero público, sino de la gestión de recursos, tanto de activos como de infraestructura. Y en infraestructura es una de las cuestiones más importantes que vemos una desconexión en el documento cero, que la inversión en la infraestructura local es una necesidad crítica. No vamos a llegar a 2030 si no hay inversión en infraestructura. Y en otros espacios multilaterales que no son la cumbre, que no son la Conferencia para el Desarrollo, como el G20, cuando el G20 es presidido por gobiernos del sur global, la conversación sobre la infraestructura es protagonista. Mientras que cuando llega al norte, volvemos a irnos de esta necesidad de inversiones que realmente es lo que está frenando el desarrollo. Entonces, en ese sentido, necesitamos estrategias de financiamiento innovadoras y para esto, que está en el documento, bonos municipales, alianzas público-privadas eficientes y transnacionales y los fondos de garantía. Los fondos de garantía no… hay buenos ejemplos y de esto podemos hablar en otro momento. No están garantizando la capacidad de riesgo asumido que pueden asumir las concentraciones de poder y las infraestructuras municipales y regionales que existen. Es evidente que hay un compromiso por fortalecer la capacidad de gestión financiera local, es decir, no asumimos que estamos y en ese sentido desde el gobierno local se acepta que hay que mejorar la planificación, la gestión y el mantenimiento de los activos de esta infraestructura. Y hablando ya de desarrollo, y vuelvo hacia los datos, hay que replantearse dentro de la estructura financiera el sistema de cooperación internacional para que éste pueda ser canalizado de manera efectiva. Solo el 1.3 de la asistencia oficial para el desarrollo se dirige a ciudades y regiones. Y si comparamos con el dato que dábamos antes, que el 40% de la inversión pública de la implementación de la Agenda 2030 viene del gobierno local, es incongruente en cómo estamos articulando la arquitectura necesaria para esto. Entonces, volvemos a la insistencia de mejorar los mecanismos de financiación y de revisar el sistema financiero local. Y en esto empiezo ya a poner lo que me pedías, Jordi, de dónde estamos pudiendo plantear esto y cuáles son diferentes avenidas más allá de la cumbre de financiación para el desarrollo, en donde evidentemente hay una estrategia desde la Global Task Force de incidir en el borrador y en los mecanismos de financiamiento. Uno es el G20. No podemos negar que para estar listos para el mercado y para poder entrar en la reforma de los bancos multilaterales de desarrollo tenemos que ir con el grupo de los 20. CGLU es el convocante del grupo de interés oficial de ciudades, que es el U20, y en este sentido aquí es donde se está planteando una reforma integral a cómo se accede al financiamiento multilateral para el desarrollo y también sus mecanismos de seguimiento más allá de que tengamos o no la garantía de los fondos. Segundo, la innovación y digitalización. Para mejorar ingresos necesitamos digitalizar y para rendir mejor cuentas también tenemos que digitalizar. Esto es tanto los sistemas de transferencia como las capacidades del mismo gobierno para su recaudación y aquí vamos con el Digital Compact de las Naciones Unidas y traerlo a buen puerto. Y finalmente, dentro de todos los otros multilateralismos, poder integrar la implementación del Pacto para el Futuro, vemos como un buen punto de entrada la Declaración sobre Generaciones Futuras. No se podrá garantizar el derecho de las generaciones futuras si no hay una inversión en infraestructura pública municipal y regional, y es aquí donde, independientemente del resultado de la declaración y los compromisos que tengamos en Sevilla, podemos ver los puntos de entrada. Me quedaría aquí, Jordi, y feliz de seguir con las discusiones. Gracias.
Thank you, Pablo. Clearly, the role of the advocacy role and the door-opening role that UCLG plays for local and regional governments in the international sphere is key and instrumental. And definitely, there's the policy recommendations and policy asks that UCLG is gathering through your own mechanisms of consultation at the local level. Clearly articulates a to-do list for member states and international organizations that is clearly articulated. So thank you very much for that. Another group of local authorities, locally oriented authorities, I would say. I don't know how to call it because I know there's a lot of UN organizations involved into this coalition. And those are UN organizations across the system with sensitivity for the local level that have articulated this local 2030 coalition that are basically also minding that space for the localization of the Sustainable Development Goals to be at the forefront of the international agenda is my colleague Sébastien Bauzel, who's the head of the Secretariat of the Local 2030 Coalition. Maybe you can also contribute to what UCLG just presented, and again, looking at the examples that are coming from the local level on the challenges that are being faced in the localization process of the INFFs. What is the Local 2030 Coalition doing in supporting that kind of process of bringing that at the forefront, and what kind of policy recommendations or elements or strategies are you pushing forward to support that dynamic? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordi. Yes, maybe starting, it will be an eagle eye view because 5 minutes will not be enough to be exhaustive, but starting from the starting point of many interventions since yesterday, or in a context of, on the one hand, we need to advance quite quickly because 2030 is around the corner on the implementation of the agenda and progress to be made. On the other hand, the context of multiple overlapping crises of different natures, not needed, sorry, I will go, yeah, thank you. Of different natures, and in this sense also, and building on what, and not repeating what Pablo was saying, like the idea of local level, not local governments in a leadership role, but also multiple stakeholders around. We talked a lot about private sector, civil society, also the youth. You mentioned future generations, etc. So the need to bring together all these stakeholders, not only because local level is where the social contract materialized, is where economic opportunities are created and destroyed, is where public services are delivered, but also because we need a systemic transformation, and we need it now. It's almost an oxymoron, no? And to do so, we need to transform systems, we need to build on what is existing, we need to scale up and leverage solutions that are already working on the ground, and many of them exist in a multi-level, multi-stakeholders framework. And this is what the localization, the Local 2030 Coalition is all about. You know, it's bringing together, offering a platform that is indeed, as you say, the UN system platform, UN system-wide, with 14 UN entities involved in it. UNDP is one, UNICEF and our colleagues are here is another. We have 12 others with UN Habitat and FAO in co-chairing the coalition. But we also have, on the other hand, our constituencies, and the global task force that UCLG is spearheading is representing one of the constituencies, local and regional governments. We also have civil society organizations, national governments, youth, private sector as part of our constituency. So this makes us kind of a hybrid thing, and also at the same time I would say the beauty of it, like bringing together all these forces and joining forces to advance the localization. So in this context, and not to be exhaustive on all that the coalition do, we have one element are the working groups that are bringing together the whole of UN expertise to address this kind of subjects from an expert point of view and feeding in the global processes that are mentioned, including towards FFD4. One of these working groups is on financing and localizing finance, and they issued a position paper, so on behalf of the coalition, so it's the UN system-wide position and 14 UN agencies contributing to it. It's titled Local Finance is Development Finance, and since I don't have much time, I propose to go in bullet point mode towards the recommendations that it has. First, based on a problem statement and the acknowledgement of, one, that local leadership is crucial. I think I don't need to elaborate on it. It has been done before. Second, that there are many challenges in financing localization and local development, and that in turn it is crucial to advance the 2030 agenda. Third, that it is needed to align financing with national and local strategies, and in turn align them all to SDGs to be able to accelerate. And we'll see that the integrated local financing framework has a critical role to play there. Fourth, to strengthen financial systems in general, and also to enhance revenue collection, efficiency of public spending, fiscal transfers, etc. at all levels, and it has to do also with multi-level fiscal systems. And then fifth, that policy alignment and capacity building is key to ensure that we are efficient in our acceleration towards the Agenda 2030. And based on this understanding or analysis that is made jointly within the paper, but by all the UN system looking at localizing finance, we have 7 recommendations towards FFD4, and I will just, again, in bullet point, not to take too much time, go through them. One is to highlight that local and regional governments and other stakeholders of local development need to have a voice in global fora, and their role needs to be highlighted. The second point is a joint call for support to invite member states to build capacities and to build leadership at local, empower local and regional governments to have this capacity to deliver on localizing finance. The third is to advance integrated local financing frameworks to strengthen alignment, as I was saying, of strategic planning with budgeting and other financing flows and with SDGs and Agenda 2030 as a whole. The fourth is to develop and enhance financial instruments, and we talked a lot about this, like to enable this reality of localizing finance. The fifth is to promote horizontal knowledge exchange between local and regional governments, and in this sense also bridge gaps that can exist between different regions and different contexts. Six is to recognize the local and regional governments' agility and proximity to enable these systemic transformations that I was talking about at the beginning of my intervention. And seventh will be to ensure an inclusive preparatory process towards FFD4, so indeed including the voices of local and regional governments and the multiple stakeholders of local development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. I'll highlight this element of the building the capacity building element, and I think something that sometimes we have a tendency of misreading is that it has to be built from the national level to the local level, when capacity may be, sometimes not, but maybe already in existence at the subnational and local level to train other peers and other colleagues. And on this front, we have with us an expert on decentralized cooperation and the whole dynamic of what I would say is like the equivalent of South-South cooperation, it's the decentralized cooperation, the peer-to-peer exchanges, how the decentralized cooperation can play a huge role in fostering those capacities at the national level in the localization of frameworks like the integrated national financing framework. So Aitor, if you can a little bit give us a, in a few minutes, your perspective of the role of decentralized cooperation in this space. And then maybe we can open a debate after that. I mean, I would want to have some time with for the table to give us a little bit of feedback. Of course, we will hear from the colleagues in FAMSI that they have a space prepared for having a bigger debate on this in Seville. But if you can give us a few pointers on that, and then we can take it from there. Thank you.
Sure, Jordi, thank you very much. Yeah, I wanted to move the focus a bit towards sub-national governments in the global north, but finding some commonalities also with what has been said about governments in the global south, demanding more voices, demanding more involvement in the global conversation, and also probably engaging in capacity building hand in hand with national governments and ideally under internationally agreed frameworks. So as I said, the focus of a research that is being conducted in Spain on a yearly basis is on the contribution of subnational governments to development finance, and more specifically to ODA. So we have conducted yearly with support from the Basque government and also contacts made available by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Spain. We have conducted this report that already shows that there is some lack of attention to subnational governments in development cooperation. As you all know, official ODA statistics, they are run by the OECD, but when it comes to ODA provided by subnational governments, the identification of the government is not kept in official records. So first thing we are doing with this report that you see here, we get to national databases and we break down ODA into the different levels of governance. And we find that there is ODA provided at the regional and local level that amounts to $3.5 billion every year. And this is growing. This first graph that I'm showing shows how this amount is growing. And of course, it doesn't represent a huge percentage within global ODA, and it has nothing to do with the shift from billions to trillions. We are still in 3.5 billions, but still, this is a very interesting, I think, source of finance that can come along with also some political support, also some technical knowledge, as you said, Jordi, peer-to-peer exchange of information and experience, and we believe that this is something that could be made more visible. Also, by means of this research, we've been able to map what we call, for instance, donor cities, also donor regions, or donor supramunicipal entities. And we find that there are in the global north 650 cities, including the city of Barcelona, which, by the way, ranks 5th in the ranking, the global ranking of donor cities, and regional governments like Catalonia, which ranks 2nd in the global ranking of donor regional governments. And we heard Councillor Duc proposing a significant increase of this funding. So I think this is something that should be made more visible. And let me elaborate a bit more on the argument of why this should be more visible. First of all, as the Catalonian councillor said, this is very much linked to a very powerful UN idea tagged as the 0.7 target. We have, with this mapping, we have had also access to many of the laws and the strategic plans that frame local and regional aid, and in all of them, there is this commonality. They evoke the 0.7 target as a UN commitment that is endorsed by these sub-national governments, sometimes small villages in the Alps, in the Pyrenees, which also want to do their part in this UN commitment. So I think it is maybe it's not the focus of this meeting, but the Secretary of State, Eva Granados, also referred to the challenges to the multilateral system. Some of them are political, very political, and I think it's interesting to also sustain development finance and UN agreements on development finance in the territory and to anchor those commitments within citizens. Well, secondly, experts, when they look at this type of flows, including the OECD, they see a lot of potential, as I said, in capacity building. That's something you also referred to, Jordi. This is a bit of funding, but it might also be a lot of knowledge that can be made available in sub-state governments that need to build capacity to meaningfully participate in these integrated frameworks. On another note, we also find in our research that donor cities themselves, they started these local aid policies mainly driven by grassroots activism, by demands from civil society organizations, and today they are channeling most of the funding through CSOs. But we also find that there is an increased demand by donor governments, local governments themselves, to engage in city-to-city cooperation, engagement in city networks, and they really want to work in this peer-to-peer development cooperation with obviously some solidarity motivations, but also with a mutual interest approach. So we think that these possibilities, they are still not explored sufficiently, and of course integrated local financing frameworks can be seen as an opportunity to also organize this contribution and tap into the technical and the financial contributions that come from subnational donor governments.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Aitor. No, the issue of ILFFs being an opportunity to project, what has already been happening, and it's been invisibilized, for many, many years. I think it's of critical importance. Allow me to do this. We have 5 minutes to go, and we have one speaker that's going to present us the space. We have heard the national examples. We have heard what the global networks are doing to support in this regard. We have heard the expert on decentralized cooperation. I want to invite the rapporteur, Madam Andrea Costafredo, Director General of for Cooperation of the Government of Catalonia, who's been listening very attentively from the tables. I think the idea here was to make sure that we get the perspective from your side, and then at the end of the panel bring her to the table. But invite the colleagues from the World Forum on Local Economic Development to provide us now with, okay, what would be next for this conversation, right? Where do we take it? Where can we engage further? How all this could gel prior to the FFD process in Seville. It also happens to happen in Seville as well. But so with us is Xavier Mestres, which is coming from the Secretariat of the World Forum on Local Economic Development. It can give us a little bit of a presentation on that space. And then I'm going to ask Andrea to please give us a little bit of a summary of the discussion, because I don't think we're going to have a lot of space unless there is a burning question from the floor. I don't think we're going to have a lot of time to have the discussion. So, Xavier, where do we meet next time?
So thank you so much, Jordi. I think I will switch to Spanish also to explain better myself. Para poner un poco en contexto el Foro Urbano, el Foro Mundial de Desarrollo Económico Local, también venimos de un proceso desde el año 2011, conjuntamente con el PNUD, con la OIT, con la CGLU, donde el foro se convierte y se conceptualiza como un proceso abierto, un proceso de diálogo internacional, un proceso de intercambio de experiencias sobre la temática del desarrollo económico local, ¿no? Y en este sentido, a lo largo de estos casi 15 años aproximadamente, hemos consolidado tanto el desarrollo económico local como un marco conceptual para la estimulación de implementación de políticas de desarrollo local, como también el fortalecimiento tanto de los miembros del comité como también de los países y ciudades que han albergado los diferentes foros, ¿no? En este sentido, nosotros cuando conceptualizamos también la 6ª edición del Foro Mundial, que se celebrará del 1 al 4 de abril, dentro de 2 meses en Sevilla, lo conceptualizamos también con una estrategia acompañada a largo plazo, ¿no? y visualizando también la Agenda 2030. Identificando también una serie de hitos y una hoja de ruta donde vemos que podemos incidir un poco más en poner en el foco la temática del desarrollo económico local, ¿no? Participamos también en el noviembre del año pasado en el Foro Urbano Mundial de Egipto, pero también identificamos la Conferencia Internacional de Financiación al Desarrollo, identificamos la Cumbre Social Mundial que se celebrará en septiembre en Qatar, identificamos el Foro Urbano Mundial del año que viene, del año que viene, en 2026, en Bakú, y también un poco vinculado a la celebración o al aniversario de los 10 años de la adopción de la nueva agenda urbana, ¿no? Que bueno, este Hábitat 3+10 o este Quito +10, donde se va a revisar la implementación de la nueva agenda urbana. Una serie de hitos que nos permiten posicionar e incidir el desarrollo económico local y elevarlo un poco más en la discusión más política, ¿no? Esto también teniendo en cuenta que el secretario general de Naciones Unidas, justo después de empezar el segundo mandato, publicó el informe sobre nuestra agenda común, y también teniendo en cuenta que en 2026 acabará el mandato. Por lo tanto, tenemos un periodo de tiempo interesante para posicionar este espacio también de cara al segundo periodo y a la negociación post-2030, ¿no? Bueno, entonces nos movemos en este marco. Y una vez identificado también la Cumbre Internacional de Financiación, se nos cruza en momento y lugar, ¿no? No sé si mejor o peor, pero oportuno, porque se nos cruza justo después de nuestro Foro Mundial que ya teníamos previsto, ¿no? Entonces, ahí sí que tenemos una oportunidad importante para visualizar el foro y el desarrollo económico local como una herramienta. Hemos estructurado como uno de los ejes temáticos la financiación al desarrollo económico territorial, que nos permitirá también identificar y posicionar este tema, pero también trataremos otros temas del desarrollo económico local, como puede ser la triple transición, el empleo decente, la transición justa, la cohesión social y también la economía de los cuidados, ¿no? Nos movemos en este marco, y lo que estamos trabajando también conjuntamente con el Gobierno de España es posicionar y visibilizar todos estos marcos y estos temas para también un poco trabajar a futuro y establecer un legado post-foro, ¿no? Y post-cumbre de financiación. Yo casi que lo dejaría aquí. Tenemos este espacio, solo invitarles a Sevilla del 1 al 4 de abril, y también si nos quieren acompañar en este camino, estamos trabajando también en 2027 para hacer la 7ª edición del foro y bueno, trabajar conjuntamente para este camino. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Xavier. No, muy importante trabajar el ámbito del el desarrollo económico local y vincularlo, ¿no? Las dos Sevillas, yo diría, las dos Sevillas, la Sevilla de abril y la Sevilla de junio y julio. Importante que estén interrelacionadas. El esfuerzo que se está haciendo desde el foro para responder a esta demanda también de los actores locales que quieren reunirse, que quieren encontrar un espacio para tener un impacto también en el FFD es fundamental. Muchas gracias por tener este espacio, ofrecer este espacio para el debate. With that, I'm going to give the floor to Andrea Costafreda, Director General for Cooperation of the Catalan Government, to help us a little bit. I mean, there's been a lot has been said, and there's a lot of input into this panel. But if you can give us a little bit of your own sense of, the main elements that you may have heard, and then we can wrap it up and take it from there, and maybe have a second iteration of this discussion in the World Forum of Local Economic Development, or not that far away. Thank you.
Thank you. From Barcelona to Seville and Sevilla, no? Okay. Thank you, Jordi, for inviting me, for inviting us to share with you some reflections. Maybe it won't be an exhaustive wrap-up of the session because so many ideas has been presented. I'm going to switch also in terms of just to guarantee this language diversity, and I'm going to switch to Catalan. So please take the translator gadgets because I think that you will need it. volia compartir amb vosaltres algunes 7 idees força que m'ha semblat escoltar i que ens interpel·len molt com a govern català i part de la cooperació espanyola en aquesta ruta cap a Sevilla. La primera és que efectivament tot el que té a veure amb les disputes del desenvolupament, les disputes de les transicions, les crisis, les overlapping crises, tenen una expressió molt clara en el territori i que per tant és en el territori on els governs locals i els governs territorials són els frontliners d'aquesta agenda que ens convoca a totes avui. Per tant, una idea de localització i de la importància del territori. Segona idea que ha sortit molt forta, la idea de l'ownership, de l'apropiació democràtica. No podem prendre decisions ni dissenyar estratègies sense que hi hagi un ownership i aquests frontliners són els que estan més a prop de la ciutadania, de la comunitat i per tant també els que tenen millor capacitat també per tenir knowledge, el coneixement i el detall per al bon disseny de polítiques. Tercera idea molt forta i que compartim plenament, i gràcies Pablo per portar-la a la taula, els governs locals i regionals no són només implementadors i gestors de l'Agenda 2030 o de l'Agenda de Desenvolupament, són actors polítics. I com a actors polítics tenen un rol d'habilitadors de la mobilització de recursos, reguladors, elaboradors de polítiques públiques per a mobilitzar recursos privats, però també tenen un rol com a finançadors. I no es pot pensar el rol d'actor polític dels actors locals i regionals sense una efectiva descentralització política i una efectiva descentralització fiscal. Per tant, aquesta agenda, l'agenda de la localització, de la financiació del desenvolupament, ha de recuperar necessàriament la idea de la descentralització plena política i fiscal, si no estem fent trampes. Quarta idea que ens interpel·la molt també com a cooperació i gràcies a Aitor per situar-nos per a l'interès de tots els assistents com a segons donants regionals. Efectivament som donants importants, però hem de pensar el rol de la cooperació descentralitzada d'una manera també integral. M'ha sorprès moltíssim la dada de UCLG. La cooperació descentralitzada treballa fonamentalment amb societat civil, amb multilaterals, i la cooperació descentralitzada ha de treballar més amb governs locals i governs regionals. No pot ser que un 1% de l'AOD total es destini a aquests governs que són els frontliners. O sigui, necessitem més cooperació descentralitzada per a governs locals i regionals. Perquè som donants, però a més perquè som socis, perquè som un tipus de cooperació que podem portar a la pràctica això que diem molt amb la narrativa i el relat, una relació entre iguals, una relació horitzontal. La cooperació sud-sud o la cooperació, a mi m'agrada més parlar de cooperació circular i no triangular, requereix aquesta relació entre iguals que la cooperació descentralitzada pot garantir. Cinquena idea, en aquests mecanismes de cooperació, el mecanisme que avui ens convoca, els Integrated National Financial Frameworks, no seran integrated si no incorporen un dels actors més importants per a implementar les polítiques públiques que puguin tenir un impacte amb l'Agenda 2030 i amb l'agenda de les transicions. Per tant, li podem dir integrated national and local, veurem quin és el wording, però no seran integrated si no ens incorporen. Sisena idea, els governs locals i regionals poden contribuir enormement al pacte social, a la democràcia, perquè poden garantir la legitimitat de les democràcies per resultats, perquè són els que estan més a prop del delivery, però també són actors democratitzadors perquè la seva pròpia inclusió ja transforma el sistema. I quan parlem de transformar el multilateralisme i fer-lo més inclusiu, hem d'incorporar d'una manera molt més efectiva i més integrada aquests actors que ja són per se transformadors del sistema. I l'última idea, i està vinculada a les aliances, necessitem, i avui ja hem fet un bon exercici en aquest sentit, fer una aliança més forta dels actors locals i regionals en aquesta agenda de finançament per al desenvolupament. Hem d'alçar una mica més la nostra veu, hem de sentir-nos més còmodes amb l'outcome document que sortirà de Sevilla, i aquí ens teniu com a cooperació catalana per a que això sigui una realitat. Merci.
Gràcies, Andrea, per les idees força. Thank you very much for those seven main points. I think, I don't have anything else to add as a moderator. That's why I actually sneaked my colleague Andrea to do the reporting and highlight this. I want to underscore this idea, right? It's like the inclusiveness, no inclusiveness without local. I think it's important to keep it in mind. If the integrated local financing frameworks are integrated, they need the local to be participating actively, not only taking into account, but participating actively from the get-go. So with that, let's close it here. We overdid it for 8 minutes, but thank you very much for your attention.